celebration. Thank you all for joining us today. Please stand for the arrival of the official party, the Secretary of Defense Lloyd J. Austin III, the Director of Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance of the U.S. Space Force, Major General Leah Lauterbach, and the 21st Company Officer at the U.S. Naval Academy, Lieutenant Chris Moore. Please continue to remain standing for the singing of the national anthem by Staff Sergeant Kyle Tomlin and the invocation by Chaplain Major General Stephen Scheich.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you for the great privilege of being here this morning and participating in this important event. I invite you to pray with me. Gracious God, as a heterosexual male, I have some confessing to do. I confess that I've let pomposity overshadow your righteousness. I've tolerated smugness over decency and arrogance over grace. Forgive me and others like me from a past void of inclusivity, for respect will always be the purest form of love. And so we thank you for this opportunity to celebrate the essential contributions of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender communities to our Department of Defense. We thank you that throughout history you used the LGBT community to strengthen our nation's defense and broaden diversity while adding a touch of creativity, joy, and celebration to all things. We ask that you strengthen those who struggle for acceptance. And may we heed the words of St. John, who said, friends, since God went to such length to love us, we also ought to love one another. And so we pray you smile upon this gathering and encourage my LGBT colleagues. For I pray in the name of the one from whom all blessings flow. Amen.
Please be seated. And please join me in giving Staff Sergeant Tomlin a round of applause for that wonderful rendition of our national anthem. And Chaplain Scheich, thank you so much for being here today with us. Those assembled can surely take comfort and draw strength from the affirming message you have for us all here today. Thank you. As the chair of DoD Pride, I'd like to welcome everyone here in the Pentagon auditorium and those who are joining us virtually around the world. DoD Pride is comprised of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer civilians, service members, contractors, family members, and allies to the LGBTQ+ community. This year's ceremony is a little different due to COVID restrictions, but we're so thankful that we can have a small audience here in the Pentagon and a much larger one joining us along on the web as we celebrate Pride Month. This event is an opportunity for the entire DoD community to come together and celebrate the great diversity of the American people and the enormous contributions LGBTQ service members and civilians around the world make in defense of this great nation. This year's celebration is particularly important because we're celebrating two significant milestones: 10 years since the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and the end of the transgender ban. Each and every one of us has a story to tell about these milestones. Today we'll hear a few of those stories that I hope will inspire members of our community and our allies to join and build on the immense progress we've already made. In addition to our three speakers, Secretary of Defense Lloyd J. Austin III, Major General Leah Louderback, and Lieutenant Chris Moore, I'd like to take a moment to welcome the other distinguished guests who are present with us today, including Dr. Kathleen Hicks, Deputy Secretary of Defense, the Honorable Christine Wormuth, Secretary of the Army, General Mark Milley, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Ms. Virginia Penrod, performing the duties of the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, General James McConville, Chief of Staff of the Army, General Hokanson, Chief of the National Guard Bureau, General Jay Raymond, Chief of Space Force Operations, Ms. Beth George, Acting DoD General Counsel, Vice Admiral Michael Moran, Principal Military Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition, Major General Imes, Acting Staff Director of the Marine Corps, Ramon CZ Colon Lopez, Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman, Secretary Eric Fanning, 22nd Secretary of the Army, Mr. Gautam Raghavan, Deputy Assistant to the President and Deputy Director of Presidential Personnel, Mr. Thomas Zimmerman, Special Assistant to the President for National Security Personnel, and Mr. Alex Wagner, former Chief of Staff for the Secretary of the Army. I also want to welcome all the service members and department personnel who are here with us today in the Pentagon and those joining us online. Thank you all for showing your support to LGBTQ soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Guardians, DoD civilians, and our families. With that, it's my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for today, the Honorable Lloyd J. Austin III, the 28th Secretary of Defense. Secretary Austin served our nation for 41 years in the Army, commanding at the Corps, Division, Battalion, and Brigade levels. He's served as the Vice Chief of Staff for the Army and concluded his military career as the commander of U.S. Central Command. So it goes without saying that he is a strong supporter of our service members, DoD civilians, and their families. And he's always led embracing the values of dignity and respect. He continues to carry those principles as he leads the Department of Defense and works to not only build a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive force of uniformed and civilian members alike, but also to posture the department to promote and protect human rights, the human rights of LGBTQ persons around the world in our engagements with partner nations, multilateral organizations, and foreign assistance programs. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Secretary Austin.
Well, good morning, everybody. And Rudy, thank you for that kind introduction. And thanks for pulling this together. It's pretty remarkable work that you've done over the last several weeks and months to pull this together. So let's give Rudy a round of applause. And thanks to the DoD Pride Group for bringing together this community at the Pentagon today. As Rudy mentioned, it's great to see such a tremendous array of the department's top leaders, past and present. And these leaders are here today, obviously, to support this important event. And it's great to be share the same stage with Major General Lauterbach and Lieutenant Moore, who have served their country with distinction. And let me begin by thanking all of you for your service and for the tireless work that you do every day to defend this nation. And just as important, thank you to your spouses, partners, and families, and some of whom are joining us today. None of us could do what we do without your support and your sacrifices. And so this June, we celebrate Pride Month across the department by recognizing the extraordinary achievements of our lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender service members and civilian employees. As we reflect on the progress that we've made in making sure that everyone who wants to serve and is qualified can do so with dignity and respect. You know, we know that we have more work to do, but thanks to your courage, your advocacy, and your dedication, the Department of Defense has been able to do more to secure LGBTQ plus rights than at any other time in our history. That includes efforts to ensure that all military families and spouses receive the benefits their loved ones have earned and to which they are entitled. To helping veterans who previously were forced out because of their sexual orientation to apply to correct their records, or, where appropriate, to return to service. You know, it's often said that progress is a relay race and not a single event. And that's certainly been true when it comes to the pioneers who fought for this community's civil rights in the military. Throughout American history, LGBTQ plus citizens have fought to defend our rights and freedoms. From the founding of our nation to the Civil War, from the trenches of the two world wars to Korea and Vietnam, and from Afghanistan to Iraq. They fought for our country even when our country wouldn't fight for them. And even as some were forced to hide who they were or to hang up their uniforms. When I reflect on the hard-fought progress that has been made over the years, the efforts of a number of notables spring to mind. I'm thinking of heroes like retired Major Margaret Witt. She treated countless troops as a nurse during Operations Desert Storm, Southern Watch, and Enduring Freedom before being outed against her will and discharged from the Air Force under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Now, Major Witt could have walked away, but instead she took a stand and challenged that policy in court. And her efforts contributed to the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell more than a decade ago. I'm thinking of Technical Sergeant Leonard Matlovich, a decorated Vietnam veteran who inspired Major Witt. Now, he was only 19 when he volunteered to serve. He did 3 combat tours in Vietnam and was severely wounded in Da Nang. He earned the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, and the deep respect of his teammates. But when he came home and came out, he was discharged by the Air Force. So he took up a new fight in courtrooms across the country, a fight for his right to serve his country as an openly gay man. And I'm thinking of Dr. Frank Kameny, a proud U.S. Army veteran of World War II. And Dr. Kameny was later hired as an astronomer for the Army Map Service until he was fired in 1957 for being gay. And he later said that it felt like a declaration of war against him by his own government. And then he said, like any true soldier would, "I tend not to lose my wars." And he wasn't kidding. Frank Kameny spent the rest of his life at the forefront of the gay rights movement by mentoring the next generation of activists, including Leonard Matlovich, and by marching in protest, and by founding the Mattachine Society of Washington, which is a pioneering gay rights advocacy organization. And in 1961, by bringing the first civil rights claim based on sexual orientation all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, Dr. Kameny lost that battle in court, but his activism helped set the stage for progress in the fight for full equality. Of course, not every person in this story has been a member of this community. I'm thinking, too, of Admiral Mike Mullen, my good friend and mentor. As chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he took a courageous stand against Don't Ask, Don't Tell, a stand that directly led to its repeal. And so today we commemorate 10 years since the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and we welcome a new generation of soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardians, and Marines openly and proudly serving their country. And today we can recognize and honor their contributions rather than questioning their ability to serve. And today we reaffirm that transgender rights are human rights, and that America is safer and better when every qualified citizen can serve with pride and dignity. Now that's real progress. It was hard fought, and hard won. But we've got more work to do. And our work isn't done until we tackle the challenge of sexual assault and harassment in the force. And we know that service members from this community are at elevated risk of such crimes. And our work isn't done until we recognize that the health of the force fully incorporates mental health, including for LGBTQ plus service members. And that's why we recommit to treating all wounds, both visible and invisible. And our work isn't done until we create a safe and supportive workplace for everyone, free of discrimination, harassment, and fear. Because nobody should have to hide who they love to serve the country that they love. And no service member who is willing to put their life on the line to keep our country safe should feel unsafe because of who they are. And no citizen who is qualified, willing, and able to do the job should be turned away. So we've got more work to do, but I'm confident that we'll get there because of all of you, and because of all of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender service members and civilians around the world who never stop living the values that they so bravely defend. I know that you're especially proud this month, and rightfully so. I'm proud too. Proud every month and every day to call you my teammates and to serve alongside you. Because your lives and your careers and your service and your stories are living proof that we are stronger and more effective together. So thank you for your service, and thank you for your skill, and thank you for the change and the progress that you continue to lead. It matters greatly to the defense of this tremendous nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Austin, for your remarks today, recognizing the contributions of LGBTQ service members and civilians that they have made towards national security each and every day. And thank you for the actions you've taken to promote a diverse, equitable, and inclusive Department of Defense. On behalf of DoD Pride, please accept the DoD Pride coin that we have left for you at your seat as a small token of our appreciation and our commitment to work with you to continue the great work already underway to support LGBTQ service members and civilians. Thank you. Now I'm pleased to introduce our second speaker, Major General Leah Lauterbach. General Lauterbach is Director of Intelligence, Surveillance, Reconnaissance for the U.S. Space Force. She serves as the Senior Intelligence Advisor to the Chief of Space Operations and is responsible to the Secretary of the Air Force and Chief of Space Operations for policy formulation, planning, evaluation, oversight, and leadership of Space Force intelligence. Her military career began when she received her commission in 1993 from Clemson University. She has served as an intelligence officer at the strategic, tactical, and operational levels of war throughout the Pacific, Central, and European theaters of operation. She commanded at the wing, group, and squadron levels and served as a senior military assistant to the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and led the Director of Intelligence for the Combined Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve, Southwest Asia. Now, even with all that, General Lauterbach would tell you she's really not that interesting, but I don't think that's true. And I'm sure her wife, Brenda Hall, doesn't think so either. They met at a 5K race as they were both training for triathlons, and General Lauterbach went on to complete an Ironman triathlon. That's not just interesting, that's amazing. When General Lauterbach and her wife aren't out doing amazing things, they enjoy gardening, traveling, and hiking. Please join me in welcoming Major General Lauterbach.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, sir. Rudy, for the welcoming comments. I'm sure Brenda is very embarrassed where she is working today. Unfortunately, she can't make it today. But Rudy, thank you very much for the invitation to actually speak today. I am delighted to be here, and I would say thank you even more for making this indoors and not outside during the 17-year cicada plague that I'm sure it would be out there. Mr. Secretary, distinguished leaders, to the LGBTQ folks that are in the room, our allies that are in the room, or those that are on the net. Happy Pride. This is a fabulous month for us, and we are making lots of changes, making an inclusive force, and I'm excited to be here and be part of it. Standing in front of you today, speaking on the topic of LGBTQ awareness, it's honestly not something that comes natural to me. I've hidden myself for many years, fear of outing myself, fear of not wanting to rock the boat, or being known as the lesbian trying to push an agenda. All reasons that when I look at them in total, it was really a lack of courage on my part to speak out more over the last few years. But these last 2 or 3 years has truly changed my mind. I was asked to speak at a recent Air and Space Force Women's Symposium on a panel titled Less Talking and More Doing. These men and women are incredibly impressive and inspiring. They're young Air Force captains or Space Force majors, staff sergeants, airmen, and specialists. They're all making a change through the Women's Initiative team in the Department of the Air Force and other organizations. I'd like to thank them for symbolically kicking me in the rear and giving me the courage to share my story and to play a role in the stand-up of the Air Force and the Space Force's LGBTQ initiatives team. This has become my new personal mantra: less talking and more doing. There is change to be made, and I am encouraged that we're getting after it, a more inclusive workforce. I'll speak more about the initiatives team in a few moments, but first let me tell you about my story and my experiences, both before now and then 10 years after the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. After coming out in my small social circle in 1997, I lived under the policy of Don't Ask, Don't Tell for about 14 years. I have firsthand knowledge of what it means to live and work in a non-inclusive workforce, and I would describe that as personally challenging, upsetting, and sometimes demeaning. I put my desire to serve the nation above my desire to live a normal life. Instead of being my true self, I hid, I evaded questions, I was untruthful at times of simple things about describing what I would do on the weekends. My private life and my relationships were stressed. There was a lack of support for my family, and I was clearly not the best officer I could be. Any officer who is hiding from their peers, their superiors, their subordinates is not developing trusting relationships. I remember my friends putting masking tape on the DOD sticker on the front windshield of the car if we went to the local gay bar, so that we could not be identified as military to any special agent that might be looking for us. I lived in a constant state of paranoia for those first few years, and then eventually I could tell things were changing. Attitudes started to change, and there were peers of mine that I could confide in. For all those times that I was TDY or deployed, if something happened to me, they were responsible to tell my girlfriend, because I didn't know who else would. As opposed to dwelling then on that darker period in my life, I now choose to focus on the light. Since the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I've been able to live openly gay without negative repercussions to my job. I am a better officer, developing those trusting relationships with coworkers. I've met and married my person, Brenda, and I've had a wonderful experience living my personal and professional lives as one. My public coming out was in 2012, after Brenda and I realized that we were going to be a long-term couple. I told my peers, who were all colonels at the time, and they were all incredibly supportive and welcoming. My wing commander, he gave me a huge hug, and we just both shed some tears out of happiness and relief. It was a wonderful experience for me. And not long after that, I needed to tell the two 3-star generals who had recently hired me for a new command position. Neither batted an eyelash, and both welcomed Brenda into the Air Force family. We traveled to California so that we could get married, and Brenda got her first DoD ID card, and within a month, we were in command at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. I was beaming with pride. Over the next few years, I shared my experience with those who asked, and I mentored other members to take the same steps that I took. We all had some amount of courage because the policy had changed. The leadership and policy from the Department of Defense and the Air Force, they backed me up. I was nervous to be exposed, but I also knew I had avenues of recourse should things go awry. So fast forward to about 7 or 8 months ago. Again, I was encouraged to engage in less talking and more doing. After I attended a grassroots crucial conversation session that was hosted by a local wing commander. With the help of friends and allies, we decided that a barrier analysis working group was necessary to determine if the LGBTQ community in the Department of the Air Force is able to serve openly without fear, and if the environment is inclusive and welcoming. We all know the military is an all-volunteer force. We need to recruit the best and brightest and those passionate to serve. We need a diverse workforce, one that looks like the American public, and creating an inclusive environment helps to ensure that we retain that talent. Diversity is essential to our future success and security. There's a wealth of data out there showing diverse teams are more innovative, better problem solvers, and are less prone to groupthink. Inclusion is what allows our workforce to stay diverse. But there are active measures that we have to take in order to present an inclusive workforce, one that encourages belonging. So let's start doing. Today, I have the privilege to serve as the co-champion for one of the Department of the Air Force's newest barrier analysis working groups. It is named the LIT, or the LGBTQ Initiatives Team. The LIT is focused on continuing and expanding the inclusive military workforce. We stood up the LIT in March of this year. Our vision statement is to be the light that illuminates the path towards change, acceptance, and equality for all of those that came before us and those that will come after us. We named the group LIT after a few conversations and a little bit of back and forth. I just love it. It has multiple meanings. So sometimes you need to light a fire to get things changed, or illuminate the future, or staying lit means we plan not to burn out. We have 2 co-leads, 3 co-champions, team leads of each of our lines of effort to focus our group of over 100 folks thus far. Our first focus is to identify what barriers exist to inclusivity and then recommend changes to the Department of the Air Force leadership. Think of our use of gendered language within some of our family advocacy programs as an example. Dads 101 might not seem all that inviting to the 2 moms who are about to have a child. Meanwhile, the Moms and Preschoolers program might not all seem that inviting to the 2 dads with a 4-year-old. I think we can find ways to make these programs more inclusive and provide access to the LGBTQ community without diminishing the programs for others. Second, We hope to provide education and bring awareness to these barriers or the culture that is stopping us from inclusivity. I believe the last time I had training on LGB issues was when the Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal training, which I actually had to present as a closeted commander in 2010. So we've come a long way, but I've come to realize that if we share our stories and openly communicate, we break down barriers. This may result in seemingly awkward or uncomfortable conversations, but truly, it is necessary discourse. As an example, shortly after taking command in 2014, a gentleman in the workforce came to my office to better understand me being the first gay commander. He wanted to know how to address my wife, Brenda. I told him he could call her Brenda, or my spouse, or my wife. That I called her my wife. Even for me, it felt funny at first, but after saying it a few times, it becomes natural. Similarly, as a co-champion for the LIT, I'm learning an incredible amount from my transgender and gay male colleagues on the need for medical providers to become more familiar with unique LGBTQ experiences. Today, I can say there is unfamiliarity in the medical field that limits care to some of our service members and families. If we don't have these sometimes uncomfortable conversations, then we will not learn and we will not increase our awareness of the issues. Our third focus is to provide support to our community, our teammates who are still challenged, either personally or professionally within their units. We want to ensure that they have a group, the LGBTQ community, within the service for a place that they can ask questions, they can lean on someone, they can share their frustrations or their joys. Unfortunately, there is still a lot of hate and judgment, and we need to support our members who are subjected to discrimination outside the DoD, from local communities, or those that are hidden by the keyboard on social media. In the Air Force, we call this being a good wingman. My experience, though, is that we can do better to protect our LGBTQ wingmen and our Space Force guardians. So my exemplar for my new mantra, less talking and more doing, it is the LIT. We are identifying barriers to inclusivity, we are already bringing awareness, and we're providing an Air Force and a Space Force group for our community to rally around. I encourage you to get involved in any service, whether you're a card-carrying LGBTQ member or an ally. Each week, I get more emails from airmen and guardians, civilians, Guard Reserve members who ask what they can do to help and how they can support. Our momentum is picking up every month, and we have an awesome opportunity in front of us. It's truly a privilege to be part of a group of airmen and guardians, military and civilian, who wish to make things better for those coming after them. To change culture, we need to change hearts and minds, but also policy. Evidenced by the 10-year anniversary of Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal, it was the policy that once stopped me and many others in the LGBT community to realize our best selves. And now the lifting of the transgender ban. I'm certain these repeals have influenced and will continue to influence many in the military to continue to serve our nation. This is exactly what inclusion is to me. Make the workplace an environment that welcomes those who wish to serve, who bring a passion, an expertise, and a tenacious work ethic. With that, we'll build better and more inclusive, we will build better and more innovative teams and take on the toughest challenges. Diversity and inclusion, they aren't buzzwords to me, they are a mission. So I thank you to the leaders here today, to the advocates, the allies who came before us, those who are with us today, and those who will continue to support us in the future. I look forward to making some change with you. I look forward to less talking and more doing. Thank you.
Thank you, General Lauterbach, for sharing your story with us and for all that you are doing with the LGBTQ initiatives team to make the department more inclusive and responsive to the needs of our community. On behalf of DoD Pride, please accept the coin we've left for you at your seat as a small token of our appreciation for all that you've done and all that you continue to do. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our final speaker for today is Lieutenant Christopher Moore. Lieutenant Moore enlisted in the Navy in October 2005 as a Master-at-Arms. As the Assistant Leading Petty Officer, he was responsible for providing security to the Strategic Weapons Facility in Bangor, Washington. He was accepted to the United States Naval Academy in 2010 and was commissioned in May 2014 and earned a Bachelor of Science degree in history. In June 2014, he was assigned as first lieutenant aboard the USS Gravely. In November 2015, he was assigned as auxiliaries officer, where he deployed to 5th and 6th Fleet areas of operation, participating in multiple multinational naval exercises, including Operation Raging Torrent. In 2016, he became Gravely's fire control officer, responsible for the operation and maintenance of the Aegis fire control system. Lieutenant Moore was selected to the United States Naval Academy Leadership, Education, and Development Cohort in 2019 and earned a Master of Arts from George Washington University. He will be attending Surface Warfare Officer Department Head School in August 2021. Talking with Chris, I learned that when he isn't working, he's still working to support his fellow sailors. He's an assistant coach for the Women's Rugby Club at the Naval Academy. He routinely speaks to midshipmen about gender issues and diversity and inclusion in courses and on panels, and mentors several LGBT junior officers. Chris did let me know that he has some fun planned before he's headed off to school. He and his dad will be hiking on the Appalachian Trail later this month. It looks like he and General Lauterbach will soon be able to exchange some hiking stories. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Lieutenant Chris Moore to the stage.
Sorry, I'm a little shorter than everybody else here. Good morning, everyone. Secretary Rudy, thank you very much for having me here today. 15 years ago, when I enlisted in the Navy, I could not have imagined a Pride event being held at the Pentagon, let alone speaking at said events. So thank you very much. It's quite the honor. There are three main topics I want to discuss today, all dealing with leadership. Many of you have probably heard of these topics before. Mission first, people always, treating people with dignity and respect, and training your relief or inspiring others to take your job. I've spent the last 2 years at the Naval Academy teaching midshipmen leadership lessons. I'm involved in mentoring young officers or young potential officers into commissioning in the naval service. And that's given me the time to reflect on my own service and my own experiences. And I want to share a few of those experiences today. I didn't know I was part of the LGBT+ community when I enlisted in the Navy in 2005. I remember my recruiter repeatedly having me sign the don't ask, don't tell paperwork, although I didn't know why he was making such a big deal about it, because I didn't think it affected me. I could not have been more wrong. Since signing those documents, I've come out as a lesbian, and then as a transgender man, and then now as a gay trans man. Leadership comes down to taking care of our people and accomplishing the mission. One of my professors used to say, mission first, people always, and that really stuck with me, because there's always this back and forth about mission first or people first. But I really believe if we get down to it, if we take care of our people, we'll do better at accomplishing the mission. So when I heard mission first, people always, I felt that really grasped the reality. Throughout my career, I've had leaders that have inspired me to get the job done, to take care of my sailors, and to never give up. My first encounter with truly inspirational leaders came just a couple years after I enlisted. By the time I was wrapping up A school, that's the technical school where we learn our first jobs in the Navy, in 2006, that's where I was learning to be a Master at Arms or security force personnel. I was already starting to figure out that I might not be as straight as I had originally thought. But I remember signing those don't ask, don't tell papers, and it scared me, because I knew I was starting what I hoped to be a career, or at least something that was going to get me through college someday. So I buried myself into that closet. A few years later, while I was serving as the security force personnel in Bangor, Washington, a senior petty officer reported to my Master Chief and let my Master Chief know that I was a lesbian and in a relationship with a woman. My Master Chief looked that petty officer in the eyes and said, "I have better things to do with my time than to kick out a perfectly good sailor." I heard about this through my division officer, who kind of gave me a heads up and told me to keep my head low for a little bit just while this all blows over. But this was the first time that I felt like someone had my back in the Navy. Of course, I couldn't come out of the closet still because it was still during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. But I started to feel a feeling of relief and safety, though I still, of course, had to be careful. By protecting me in that instance, they knew that I was going to continue to work hard for the organization that clearly had my back. We could continue to do well in our mission, and the cyclical function of mission accomplishment and sailors' well-being would continue. Master Chief Tisdale continues to inspire sailors, young and not so young, to pursue excellence in all we do, to take care of our people, and to never forget where we came from. I know the sailors of Navy Region Southwest are happy to have her as their regional Master Chief. When I was accepted to the Naval Academy in 2010, I had mixed feelings. I was beyond excited to have been offered an appointment and a chance to realize my dreams. But I knew the Academy would be tough, mentally and physically, though I really had no idea just how tough that was going to be. But I was also concerned about feeling safe. I was in a long-term relationship with a woman at the time, and we wanted to send each other letters over Plebe Summer. Plebe Summer is the indoctrination kind of like boot camp for the academies. In those letters, we felt like it would be scary to do that, right? So I thought the midshipmen in charge of me were going to realize that I was sending the same individual letters back and forth, so they would make assumptions, rightfully so, that we were in a relationship. So on those letters, we decided her name was going to be Jay, and I would try to use he and him pronouns when referring to her, but I slipped up more than once. I was so scared that I was going to get kicked out. My grades in physical fitness were less than stellar, so if I ever went up to a hearing or a board to be discharged, it's not like I had that to protect me. I very seldom hung out with my classmates, but rather sat alone in my room attempting to study, but usually found it very difficult to concentrate. In December of 2010, during break between semesters of my plebe year, I learned that President Obama had signed the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I was in a grocery store with my dad when I got a text message that Don't Ask, Don't Tell was gone. I froze, and my dad saw this weird look on my face, and he asked if everything was okay, and all I could do was show him my cell phone. At that point, I didn't have a smartphone, I didn't have an iPhone or whatever at the time, so I couldn't check the internet to see if it was real. So we quickly wrapped up our groceries and got out of there so we could go home and watch the news. I was living in Boise, Idaho at the time, so it was a little difficult to find that on the news, but eventually we found it, and it was confirmed. My father urged me to continue to be careful, that the implementation would take some time, but that I could finally breathe a sigh of relief. When I got back to school in January of 2011, my gunnery sergeant and lieutenant called me up for a meeting. They wanted to talk to me about what the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell meant for me, to give me their support, and to open up a line of communication if I were to receive any sort of harassment or backlash. I think this was the first time I heard someone tell me that every sailor, midshipman, and person in general deserved to be treated with dignity and respect, and I truly felt it. Now, during general military trainings, we hear those words sometimes, but when they told me that, I honestly believed them. I had struggled immensely at the Naval Academy in that first semester, but during the spring semester of my plebe or freshman year, I was able to focus and get my academics and physical fitness where it needed to be. A large part of my success during that time was confidence and leadership gave me just simply by talking to me like a human, by making sure I understood I belonged, or at least if I didn't belong, it wasn't because I was gay. Leading people is about treating people with dignity and respect, so that everyone can reach their full potential for their service, for their units, and their teams, so that they can function the best. During my time as a junior officer, even before policies came out to protect me and allow me to serve openly as a transgender person, My chains of command, peers, and my sailors always treated me with dignity and respect. Had it not been for their support, I honestly don't think I could be here in this room today. I attribute my successes to the amazing leadership and crew of the commands that I have had the privilege to be a part of. After graduating from the Naval Academy in 2014, I joined the USS Gravely, homeported in Norfolk, Virginia. I had started to figure out that I was transgender just a couple years before and had contemplated coming out once I commissioned and got to the ship. But I decided that I wanted to not take that gamble quite yet. I wanted to prove myself as an officer and a surface warfare officer first. So I waited about a year. About a year later, in August of 2014, I reported to the dock on the ship. On smaller ships, we don't have doctors per se, but we have very highly qualified hospital corpsmen that act as our HMCs, our independent duty corpsmen. We call those guys docs. I told him that I was going to be making an appointment to start hormone therapy and begin my transition, and that I planned on informing the captain in the next few days. After I mustered the courage, I notified my captain of my status and intent to transition, and she told me she supported me. We discussed the process, and I told her that I wanted to inform the rest of the wardroom, the chief's mess, and the crew prior to our upcoming deployment so that we could stomp out any unnecessary rumors before we were out in the 5th and 6th Fleet areas of operation. She gathered all the officers in the wardroom within the next day or so, and I was given the opportunity to share my story. I was overwhelmed with the amazing support the officers showed me, and when the chief's mess and the rest of the crew were informed, they were equally as supportive. A few short months later, we deployed to the 5th and 6th Fleet areas of operation, mostly in the Persian Gulf and Red Sea. I qualified as an officer of the deck and surface warfare officer on that deployment, and I must say, we were pretty successful in our operations. On our way home in the summer of 2016, news broke that a policy was being released to allow open transgender service. I don't know if it's because we were on our way home from deployment. It didn't quite hit me yet, but it would really make sense in the summer of 2017 just how important that policy was. In July of 2017, things changed. There was a sudden change in policy which indicated the end of my career. My commanding officer broke the news to me right after we got in from about a month-long underway, and he pledged his support, and the same with my command master chief, fellow division officers, and my sailors. As it turns out, my career didn't end. I was grandfathered in under the previous policy, so I was safe. But I will never forget the love and support that everyone on board Gravely, all the way up to my captain, showed me during those darkest days. Before this all happened, I was planning on just doing my 20 and retiring. I'd done the math. I could do my department head tours and a short shore duty and get out right at 20 years. I was done. I could go find a civilian job and make some good money or just retire and live the life. But the leadership displayed by my commanding officer I had on Gravely inspired me to stay in longer. Their devotion to their sailors showed me who I wanted to be. They've inspired me to stay in for as long as I can and to lead with that same commitment to doing the right. You don't need shiny pins on your collar or a fancy title to be a leader. Though these events each dealt with leaders that were in positions of authority over me, I have countless experiences of peers and people junior to me showing me that same level of support and leadership. Each of us can inspire and care for the people around us and work towards achieving a common goal together. So with this Pride Month and every month after, reflect on the ways you can help someone next to you stay the course and reach their goals. By treating everyone with dignity and respect, we will have a stronger force that our service members will be proud to continue and to serve with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing your incredible story with us here today and for all that you're doing to support the next generation of LGBT service members. On behalf of DoD Pride, please accept the coin that we've left for you at your seat as a small token of our appreciation for all that you do. Ladies and gentlemen, before we close the ceremony today, we'd like to acknowledge the support that has made, all the support that has made this celebration possible. DoD Pride would like to thank OSD Public Affairs, OSD Graphics, Secretary of Defense Protocol, the Pentagon Building Management Office, and especially my friend Pat Jett at the Army Multimedia Visual Information Directorate for all their support in making today's event so great. And I'd personally like to thank my husband, Chad Coots, for all that he's done in supporting me as our group pulls together this event every year. Thank you for attending today's celebration, and above all, for supporting the DoD LGBT community in their service to the nation. This concludes today's event. As you exit to comply with COVID restrictions, we'll be exiting by rows, beginning with the first row. Thank you all for showing up today.